The vanishing. The Galactic Concord had stood for over 8 centuries, binding together 27 spacefaring civilizations in a network of trade, shared knowledge, and mutual protection. At the center of this interstellar alliance, not by design but by circumstance, stood humanity. Humans had been latecomers to the galactic stage, emerging from their isolated corner of the Orion Arm barely 3 centuries ago, but they had quickly become indispensable. It wasn't that humans were the strongest. The crystalline Vazarathi could withstand the pressure at the bottom of gas giants. It wasn't that humans were the most intelligent. The collective consciousness of the Norva could perform calculations that would take human supercomputers millennia. And it certainly wasn't that humans were the most technologically advanced. When humans first achieved faster-than-light travel, the ancient Chidori had already been traversing the stars for 50,000 years. What made humans special was something far more subtle. They never stopped tinkering. While other species perfected technologies and then maintained them for generations, humans were constantly iterating, improving, and reimagining. The first human FTL drive was considered primitive by galactic standards, but by the time the third-generation human drives rolled out, even the oldest civilizations were scrambling to license the technology. They're like children who never grow out of asking why and what if. High Chancellor Torvak of the Saurian Ascendancy once observed during a Concord summit. It makes them inconsistent and occasionally frustrating as allies, but invaluable as innovators. This was why, across the vast expanse of the Galactic Concord, human-designed reactor cores powered everything from the massive shield generators protecting the Vazarathi homeworld to the intricate life support systems sustaining millions on the orbital habitats above Chidori Prime. Human agricultural techniques had ended famines on a dozen worlds. Human medical breakthroughs had cured diseases that had plagued alien species for millennia. And then, without warning, they vanished. It happened during what the Galactic Standard Calendar designated as the Quiet Cycle, that brief period when most civilizations reduced activity to mark the turning of the galactic year. One moment, human starships were docked at every major port in the Concord. Human diplomats were attending conferences and summits. Human merchants were trading goods across thousands of worlds. The next moment, nothing. Every human ship simultaneously disappeared from sensors. Every human colony went silent. Every human presence throughout the galaxy simply ceased to be. No warnings, no distress signals, no final messages, just absence where presence had been. At first, the Concord leadership assumed it was some kind of technical glitch, perhaps a coordinated communications failure affecting human systems. But when emergency response vessels reached the human colony on Proxima Centauri II, they found empty cities. Personal belongings remained in homes. Meals sat untouched on tables. Vehicles stood abandoned in streets. It was as though every human had simply stepped out of existence between one heartbeat and the next. Similar reports came in from across the galaxy. Every human outpost, colony, and settlement, empty. Every human ship vanished from space, leaving behind only the faintest quantum residue, suggesting some kind of massive coordinated translocation. The initial confusion quickly gave way to alarm when the first systems began to fail. The Norva Collective was the first to report problems. Their vast orbital computational arrays, which had been upgraded with human-designed quantum processing nodes just decades earlier, began experiencing cascading failures. The Norva had integrated the human technology so thoroughly into their systems that they couldn't simply revert to older models. Within days, the Norva's predictive capabilities, which had guided Concord agricultural planning for centuries, were reduced to mere fractions of their former capacity. "We don't understand," the Norva representative transmitted to the emergency Concord session. "The human components should be self-sustaining for centuries. It's as if they were designed to require periodic maintenance that only humans knew how to provide." Similar reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. The Chidori's ancient terraforming engines, recently enhanced with human modifications, began displaying error messages in undecipherable human technical jargon. The Vazrathi shield generators protecting their homeworld from their sun's increased radiation began operating at reduced efficiency, forcing the crystalline beings to retreat to deeper caverns. Most alarming of all, the human-designed FTL communication relays that had connected the far-flung worlds of the Concorde began experiencing transmission delays, degrading from instantaneous contact to lags of minutes then hours. The galaxy is unraveling. Admiral Zex Terrell of the Saurian fleet announced grimly to the assembled Emergency Council 60 cycles after the disappearance. We integrated human technology into our infrastructure without fully understanding it. We became dependent without realizing the extent of that dependency. The council chamber fell silent. Around the circular table, representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations confronted an uncomfortable truth. They had allowed themselves to become reliant on the galaxy's youngest spacefaring race. But why would they leave? Asked Axylov, the fungal diplomat of the Mycon Communion. Humans showed no signs of dissatisfaction with the Concorde. Their trade networks were thriving. Their colonies were prospering. What could possibly drive them to abandon everything they had built here? No one had an answer. The disappearance made no sense from any political, economic, or social perspective. Some suggested it might have been technological, perhaps some experiment gone wrong, a mass teleportation accident. Others proposed darker theories, that humans had detected some threat approaching the galaxy and fled rather than face it. Or perhaps, said Kirvesh, the insectoid representative of the 3 Kring hives, antennae twitching nervously, they left because they knew what would happen without them. Perhaps this is some form of negotiation. The implication hung heavy in the chamber. Had humanity orchestrated this crisis as some form of leverage? It seemed uncharacteristic of the generally forthright species, but then again, the current situation defied all expectations. As the Concorde leadership debated, the practical consequences of humanity's absence began cascading throughout civilized space. Trade routes dependent on human navigational systems became unreliable. Medical facilities using human-designed equipment struggled to maintain care standards. Defense systems incorporating human components displayed reduced effectiveness. Most critically, the human-designed power regulation systems that had been integrated into virtually every major infrastructure project across the Concorde began showing signs of instability. These systems had been revolutionary when introduced, capable of providing clean, nearly limitless energy while automatically adjusting to demand. But now, without human monitoring and maintenance, power fluctuations began affecting everything from planetary shields to life support systems on space habitats. We need to understand exactly what we're dealing with, declared High Chancellor Torvak after 3 days of emergency discussions. I propose we establish a centralized database of all human technology currently in use throughout the Concorde, prioritizing critical systems. We must pool our knowledge and resources if we are to weather this crisis. The proposal was unanimously accepted, but the compilation revealed an even more disturbing reality. Human technology was not just widespread but foundational to the modern Concorde. Over the past 3 centuries, humans had contributed innovations to virtually every sector of galactic society, and those innovations had been integrated, built upon, and expanded until they formed the backbone of countless critical systems. They weren't just participants in our civilization, Kylov observed as the council reviewed the findings. They were its engineers. We allowed them to remake our worlds in their image because their solutions were elegant and effective. And now we stand in structures we cannot fully maintain, dependent on systems we cannot fully comprehend. 100 cycles after the disappearance, the first major system failure occurred. The atmospheric regulators on the Norva homeworld, upgraded with human technology 50 years earlier, began a catastrophic cascade failure. Toxic gases built up in the lower atmosphere, forcing the evacuation of millions of Norva to orbital habitats. But the habitats themselves weren't secure. Their life support systems, also enhanced with human technology, were showing signs of instability. The Norva found themselves facing an existential crisis with no clear solution. Similar emergencies began erupting across Concord space. The Vazrethi shield generators dropped to 30% efficiency, exposing portions of their crystalline cities to devastating solar radiation. The Chidori terraforming engines failed completely on 3 colony worlds, beginning a rapid reversion to uninhabitable conditions. And still, there was no sign of humanity. No communication, no explanation. Just the growing realization that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations had unknowingly handed the keys to their survival to their youngest member, who had inexplicably walked away. "We need to consider the possibility," Admiral Zex Terrell said grimly at the 200th cycle emergency session, "that humanity is not coming back. If that is the case, we must prepare for a future without them. And that means learning to understand and maintain their technology ourselves." The statement sparked heated debate. Some species, like the logic-driven Algori, believed it was possible to reverse engineer human systems given sufficient time and resources. Others, particularly the intuitive Mycon, argued that human technology often operated on principles that defied conventional analysis, that there was an artistry to human engineering that couldn't be easily replicated. "There is another possibility we must consider," Kurvesh said, mandibles clicking nervously. "What if humanity left? Because they knew something was coming, something they either couldn't or wouldn't face." The council chamber fell silent as the implications of this suggestion sank in. If humans, known throughout the galaxy for their tenacity and willingness to confront challenges, had chosen to flee rather than fight, what kind of threat might be approaching? As if in answer to this unspoken question, the Council's emergency session was interrupted by an urgent transmission from the outer defensive perimeter of Concord space. The transmission was fragmented, degraded by the failing communication network, but its message was clear. Unknown vessels had appeared at the edge of charted space, vessels unlike any seen before in the galaxy, vessels that had destroyed the monitoring station with weapons of terrifying power. And as the Concord leadership stared at the grainy images of the approaching ships, a chilling possibility occurred to them all at once. Perhaps humanity hadn't abandoned the galaxy. Perhaps they had been taken. The reckoning. 300 cycles after humanity's disappearance, the Galactic Concord was a shadow of its former self. What had once been a thriving interstellar alliance of 27 species now fractured into isolated pockets of civilization, struggling to maintain the most basic functions of their societies. Communication between star systems, once instantaneous through the human-designed quantum relay network, now took weeks as civilizations fell back on older, less reliable technologies. Without the efficient human FTL drives, travel between systems slowed to a crawl. Trade, diplomacy, and coordinated defense became nearly impossible to maintain on a galactic scale. The Algori, with their logical, methodical approach to problem-solving, had made the most progress in understanding human technology. Their research teams had successfully reverse-engineered some of the simpler human innovations, basic power regulation systems, certain medical devices, but the more advanced technologies remained frustratingly opaque. It's as if the humans designed their most critical systems to be deliberately inscrutable, reported Chief Analyst Mach 17 to what remained of the Concord Council. "We can make the technology work on a basic level, but the elegant efficiency, the self-regulation capabilities, those aspects elude us." What no one wanted to admit was that the Concord situation was rapidly becoming desperate. Without the technological backbone that humanity had provided, ancient rivalries between species began to resurface. Resources that had once been plentiful thanks to human efficiency now became scarce, triggering disputes that quickly escalated into armed conflicts. The Vazrethi and Saurians, once close allies, now fought over access to the rare minerals needed to maintain their failing shield generators. The Norva, facing extinction as their life support systems degraded, had begun forcibly requisitioning parts from Chidori colonies. The elegant diplomatic framework of the Concord, built over centuries, was crumbling under the pressure of survival. And all the while, the unknown vessels that had appeared at the edge of Concord space continued their slow, methodical advance inward. Initial hopes that they might be human ships returning were quickly dashed. These vessels showed no recognizable design elements, responded to no communication attempts, and systematically destroyed any Concord ships that approached too closely. "We're fighting a war on two fronts," Admiral Zex Terrell declared grimly, "against our own failing infrastructure and against these unknown invaders. Without a united response, we cannot hope to prevail against either." It was in this atmosphere of mounting crisis that an unexpected discovery was made. A small research team on Proxima Centauri II, the former human colony world closest to old Earth, found something in the abandoned human governor's residence, a sealed message pod, apparently designed to activate only after a specific period had passed since the disappearance. The pod contained a brief recording from Governor Elena Vasquez, the last human administrator of Proxima Centauri II. Her message was cryptic but revelatory. "To our friends in the Concord, if you're watching this, it means our calculations were correct. Humanity has withdrawn from the galaxy, but not by choice. We detected something approaching, something ancient and implacable that has been moving through the cosmos for millions of years. We believe it harvests advanced civilizations, particularly those with certain technological signatures. Our scientists determined that humanity had already crossed the threshold that would draw its attention. Rather than risk bringing this entity's full attention to the Concord, we activated the Exodus Protocol, a contingency we developed in secret. All of humanity has retreated to a prepared sanctuary. We left backdoors in our most critical technologies, ways for you to maintain them if you can decrypt this message fully. We had hoped to have more time to prepare you all, but the entity accelerated its approach. The key to understanding our technology lies in knowing that we never build systems around perfect solutions. We build them around elegant failures. Look not for how our systems work, but for how they're designed to break, and you'll understand the principles behind them. We don't know if we will ever be able to return, but know this: humanity did not abandon our friends. We removed ourselves as a target, hoping the entity would follow us rather than continue toward Concord space. If you're facing unknown ships at the edge of your territory, then we failed in that objective, and we can only offer our deepest apologies." The recording ended there, but attached to it was an encrypted data package, one that the Concord's best analysts believed contained the promised backdoors to human technology, if only they could decode it. The discovery sent shockwaves through what remained of the Concord leadership. Humanity hadn't simply vanished on a whim. They had sacrificed themselves, removing their presence from the galaxy in a desperate attempt to protect their allies from a threat they believed would target them specifically. "This changes everything," Tyloff said, fungal spores glowing with agitation. "If humanity withdrew to protect us, the least we can do is ensure their sacrifice wasn't in vain. We must unite against these invaders." But uniting the fractured Concord proved easier said than done. After nearly a full cycle of struggling without human technology, many civilizations had turned inward, focusing solely on their own survival. The trust and cooperation that had defined the Concord for centuries had eroded under the pressure of necessity. It was Kurvesh of the Three Kreen who proposed a radical solution. "If we cannot unite the Concord as it exists now, perhaps we need to form a new alliance, one with a single, clear purpose: decoding the human message and using that knowledge to defeat the invaders." The proposal led to the formation of the Reclamation Initiative, a small but dedicated coalition of scientists, diplomats, and military personnel from a dozen species, all committed to understanding what humanity had left behind and using it to save what remained of galactic civilization. Their first breakthrough came when an Algori analyst realized the significance of Governor Vasquez's cryptic hint about elegant failures. Human technology had always seemed to operate on principles that sometimes defied conventional understanding. But what if that was because humans designed their systems not around perfection, but around controlled imperfection? "They built resilience into everything," the analyst explained. Their systems aren't designed to never fail. They're designed to fail gradually, in predictable ways that allow for intervention. That's why their technology seemed to degrade rather than simply stop working when they left. It was designed to give us time. With this new perspective, the Reclamation Initiative began making rapid progress in decoding the human data package. They discovered that humanity had indeed built backdoor access protocols into their most critical technologies, ways to reset, repair, and modify systems without requiring the intuitive understanding that humans brought to their engineering. As the Reclamation Initiative worked to implement these solutions across what remained of Concorde space, the unknown vessels, which the Concorde now called harvesters, based on Governor Vasquez's description, continued their advance. 400 cycles after humanity's disappearance, the Reclamation Initiative made their final breakthrough. The last portion of the human data package contained not just technological information but coordinates, the location of humanity's sanctuary. They're in the Large Magellanic Cloud, reported the Al Gore analyst, beyond the edge of our galaxy. According to this data, they constructed a massive Dyson swarm there, hidden from detection by the radiation emissions of an abnormally active pulsar. They're waiting there, waiting to see if their gambit worked. The revelation sparked fierce debate within the Reclamation Initiative. Some argued they should immediately send a mission to contact humanity, to bring them back to help fight the harvesters. Others believed that doing so might simply draw the harvesters' attention to humanity's new location, negating their sacrifice. In the end, a compromise was reached. Using the now decoded human technological principles, the Reclamation Initiative constructed a single vessel, faster, more powerful, and more advanced than anything the Concorde had built before. This ship, named Emissary, would travel to humanity's sanctuary with a small, diverse crew representing the Concorde species. Their mission was not to bring humanity back, at least not physically. Rather, they would establish contact, share what they had learned about the harvesters, and request humanity's guidance in the struggle ahead. If Governor Vasquez was correct, and the harvesters targeted civilizations with specific technological signatures, perhaps humanity could help the Concorde develop defenses that wouldn't attract the invaders' attention. As the emissary prepared for its historic journey, Admiral Zex Terrell, now one of the eldest members of the Reclamation Initiative, addressed its crew with words that would be transmitted throughout what remained of Concorde space. For centuries, we lived alongside humanity without truly understanding what made them unique. We saw their constant innovation as merely a cultural quirk, sometimes useful, sometimes disruptive. What we failed to recognize was that humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy wasn't any single technology or invention. It was their perspective, their ability to look at the seemingly perfect and ask, how could this break, and how could we prepare for that failure? In removing themselves from our galaxy, humanity demonstrated a principle they had been trying to teach us all along. Sometimes, the most elegant solution isn't to build something that will never break. Sometimes, it's to break things on your own terms, in ways you can control. As you journey to find our lost friends, remember this: humanity didn't abandon us. They executed the ultimate controlled failure, removing themselves from the equation to give us a fighting chance. Now it's our turn to prove we learned their most important lesson, that true resilience isn't about never falling. It's about how you rise again after the fall. The emissary launched the next day, disappearing into the depths of space on a journey that would take it beyond the edges of the galaxy. Behind it, the remaining civilizations of the Concorde rallied around a new understanding of their place in the cosmos, and a renewed determination to face the harvesters not as 27 separate species, but as one united galaxy. And somewhere in the distant Large Magellanic Cloud, humanity waited, hoping that the friends they had left behind would understand why they had gone, and that they would someday find a way to come home.